Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Between the Lines podcast with Chris and Aiden. A lot of playoff stuff happening this weekend. NFL playoffs, college football playoffs happened last week, but we don't really kind of get into that right now. Chris and I made brackets, which are going to be very interesting to talk about. They're already pretty, I guess, a little bit all over the place, but hey, man, divisional round's divisional round. I think we're all pretty accurate on that. Chris, you want to talk about your bracket first and how you doing, brother?
Yeah, sure. Good, Aiden. How's it going, man?
hmm
Um,
I'm good. Let's go.
so the only things that I had two picks wrong this past week.
Mhm.
I had the Chargers over Houston,
Yep,
and
I did
I
too.
had Minnesota over the Rams. So I think that's the only game we split was the Minnesota Rams game.
Well,
And
wait, did you take Tampa or Washington?
I also took Tampa. I think we both did.
Yeah. Yeah, we both took Tampa.
Y- Yeah, wow, that Minnesota game really I think you saw it coming, but that kind of threw me for a loop. But
Right.
as soon as
Yeah.
I started watching that game, like the first drive, Stafford goes down the field, and then Minnesota comes out on offense, and LA is playing like a very similar defense to what the Lions did, which smothered Darnold.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that a little more when we start recapping the games, but it just surprised me. But yeah, so for my bracket,
Yeah,
um,
just go in depth. Go talk about your entire bracket. See who you got winning each game. We can or
yeah,
see who you
so
got. Yeah,
well, I'll start with the NFC.
go for it.
It's obviously a little messed up because of the way that, I didn't have the Rams advancing, so, like, the seating's all messed up. So I'll just talk about what I had originally thought. In this divisional round, I had both Philly and Detroit advancing regardless of who they were playing, so I didn't really lose anything in terms of, getting messed up by that Minnesota game, and I still think that's true. I do think that the Rams might pose a little bit of a threat for Philly, but, uh he is just kinda like the engine that runs through that whole team, and their defense is insane. Like, I said it a couple weeks ago or last week, I think this is the most complete Philly team that we've seen, even better than the Super Bowl team, because that defense is just
Yeah.
insane. So,
Yeah.
I have them and Detroit advancing. I just regardless of who they were playing, I don't see Detroit losing their first playoff game. They're getting a little bit healthier. I think Montgomery might be back, if not this week, then next week.
Yeah.
Obviously, Anzalone's
Huge
back and
game.
another week healthier. I'm not sure about Terry and Arnold. I know he got carted off, but it didn't end up being too serious.
Yeah.
So I like that they're getting a little healthier, and that bye was huge. I like Washington, but I don't see Detroit losing. And then in the NFC Championship, um, I mean, I have Detroit advancing to the Super Bowl. And I'm kinda iffy about that. I'm not thrilled with how Jalen Hurts played last week, but, like, I could easily see Saquon having one of the games that he's
Day.
had all year and just kinda taking over.
Yeah.
But if Jalen Hurts has, like, a really good game this week against the Rams, then I think that would make me really nervous if I'm a Lions fan. If he can get going a little bit. I know he had the concussion and was out a couple weeks, and he was a little off in that game, and their passing offense
Yeah.
wasn't really there. But if he can kind of, connect with Brown and Devonta Smith and Goddard, then I would be pretty scared if I were a Lions fan. And then just taking a look at the AFC side quickly, I had Kansas City advancing to the AFC Championship, regardless of who they were playing, so nothing changes for me there. And then this is the biggest game of the playoffs, I think, honestly.
Yeah.
So, Ravens Bills, I had that game picked. I'm picking Baltimore to advance to the AFC Championship game. Um, that Bills game kinda started how I expected, like, I thought it would be a little bit closer and Denver would be able to hang around, and Denver certainly had their chances to, like, tie that game or make it closer, and
Yeah.
then it kinda just fell apart instantly. Like, I don't see that happening against the Ravens. I know they have to go to Buffalo, but the Ravens are such a run-heavy offense that, like, I don't think that's a huge factor, them going on the road 'cause
Yeah.
uh, they Lamar was running like crazy last week, and King Henry had like 170, and you
Mhm.
can offset that with Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell. They just have so many weapons, and Flowers should be back. And our guy Rashad Bateman had another good game. We shouted him out last week, and he had
Yeah.
another good game. So I just like the Ravens, and I think their defense is just playing at a really high level right now. Obviously, the Bills are, it's kind of just Josh Allen, and like he can single handedly beat you, but I don't know. This is two teams that have underachieved in the playoffs in these last couple years, so it's fitting that they play each other.
Yeah,
And in the AFC
yeah,
Championship, I'm still picking the Chiefs to advance to the Super Bowl just because, like I've said it the
wow,
last couple weeks, until they show me that, there's a reason to pick against them, I'm just gonna keep picking them because they have the experience. I think this is the most well-rounded Chiefs team that we've seen as far as, um, the
balance.
level of defense that they're playing. The running game is really good with Pacheco, and Kareem Hunt's actually been a pleasant surprise coming back to the team. They have a lot of weapons, and look, I mean, you still have the best coach, and I know he's not having the best season, but still the best quarterback. So I still would pick them to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Now, who you got winning it all, Chris? Because then
Yeah, I
I'll pick
mean,
over after my
yeah,
bracket.
so I have a matchup of 2 1 seeds, which I'm not thrilled about. I don't normally love doing that. It happens sometimes, but again, like I could easily see Philly taking down Detroit in an NFC championship. But
Yeah,
I can't pick against the Chiefs until something happens to make me pick against the Chiefs, and it just hasn't happened. I know they lost to Buffalo earlier in the year, but seems like they found their footing towards the end of the year. I know they haven't played in 3 weeks, so that'll be something to watch in this game against the
yeah,
Texans, how rusty they are, but the Chiefs always start slow, so I'm not overly concerned about that, and I just, you know,
wow.
three-peats are
So
hard to
you
come
have them.
by,
I was
but
gonna say you have them three-peating. Wow.
yeah, I mean, probably cementing themselves as the greatest dynasty, right, in NFL
Yeah,
history. I don't
I'd
I
say
don't know
so. I mean,
has the team ever three-peated? I don't think so, right?
No, but I mean, this kind of three-peat definitely puts them up there with Tom and Belichick, in my opinion, or like without
Yeah, I mean,
question,
in just
if they
terms of,
get
like,
that at least.
sheer dominance, it's just if they get that, it's just I know he doesn't have nearly the rings that Tom Brady has, but this run is
Not
just
yet,
c
at
like,
least.
you just can't pick against them in my mind until you have a
No,
reason to, and we just haven't seen it.
right.
So, yeah, that
I
was a lot of
will.
talking, but I'm interested to see what you have to
No,
say
yeah,
now.
yeah, but I will say on the Chiefs real quick is what I agree with you on, Chris. Is I'll get to it real quick, but the fact that you don't have to rely on Mahomes for some of these games is what makes the Chiefs so dangerous, right? And obviously, you see in the
Exactly.
playoffs every year. If you need to rely on Mahomes in the playoffs, he'll take over, bro. He don't care. Just say, hey, if you need me to hand the ball off 25 times, I'll do it. If you need me to throw the ball 50 times, I'll do it, and we'll win the game. It doesn't matter. So, if he's the last resort, right? Chiefs are gonna win. So I agree with you on that, Chris. But I have a little bit of a different bracket. So we'll see. We'll see how this fares out. So for my NFC, you know, I go to the Vikings Rams, and I talked about last week. If Sam Darnold plays the way he did against the Lions, it's easy wraps for the Rams. And like you said, Chris, the Rams defense quite literally played the exact same way as the Lions defense did last week. And guess what? Sam Darnold did not adjust at all. So I took the Rams and they won. And I was pretty proud of that pick. I will say about all these games, besides one of them, they were all lopsided. Okay, these were not close games at all. They're very boring
Yeah, they
weekend, I
really
would say.
weren't, other
And
than the Commanders game.
yeah, the Commanders game exactly. Um, the other games I had in NFC, I had Commanders, Buccaneers. I took the Bucks. I think you did, Chris, as well. But we got to give respect to Jaden Daniels. Chris and I were talking about him yesterday. He had an absolute game, absolutely like a great game, balled out. Do I think he beats the Lions? No, purely for the fact that the rest of his team isn't as well rounded as them. But we'll get back to that in a little bit. But next game, I have Packers Eagles. Now, the Packers were already down Christian Watson. And then
Yep,
there are two starting receivers for that game. I think Dobbs and Jaden Reed went out as
yep.
well. They lost like three offensive linemen in like the first half. Jordan Love got banged up. Josh Jacobs got banged up. So I'm not saying that it was because of injury, but these guys were dominating the first half. They lost all their starters, basically. Like maybe like half of their starters got hurt in the first half. So you go into the second half with a lot of guys who have not had much playoff experience or playing time in general. You just get rolled. Like you said, Chris, this Eagles defense is disgusting. So I think relying on Barkley and that defense is what's going to take Philly pretty far. But I did have the Eagles, and they did win. So that was nice for me to see. Well, not really because I hate Philly, but nice for my bracket.
Yeah.
So I had the Rams playing the Lions and the Bucks playing the Eagles, but that's gonna switch up now. But regardless, like Chris said, I had the Lions and Eagles advancing. They're two dominant NFC teams. Most well rounded. I do agree with you, Chris, when you said the Rams would give the Eagles a run for their money. I think the Rams are always a dangerous wildcard team, purely for the fact that Matt Stafford's that veteran quarterback, gunslinger kind of thing. Um, like you said, Chris, when they went down the field and I saw what the Vikings did in their first drive, I was like, wow, this is just brutal. I will point out, though, the Vikings. Actually, I'll get to that later. I'll finish my bracket. I have Lions Eagles in my NFC Championship, and similar to Chris, I have the Lions advancing, and I agree with Chris completely. The Eagles are probably 1A, 1B in terms of the NFC, at least in the NFC teams. They're most well rounded we've seen so far with the Jalen Hurts era. Um, Detroit's still a little bit banged up, but like Chris said, they're getting a little bit more guys back here and there. I saw Hutchinson might come back for the NFC Championship game, but I don't know how if he's gonna be 100% or not. But you know, he's an impact player. Um, but I still have Detroit advancing. I just love what Dan Campbell did this year. Detroit, in my opinion, needs a Super Bowl. So we'll see what happens there. But going on to the AFC, Chargers Texans, absolute dominance from Texans, but I took the Chargers. Honestly, embarrassing from Herbert. I think there was a lot of play call, a lot of forceful pass play calling, I guess you could say. They just couldn't get the which is fair because they couldn't get the run game going that much. Vlad McConkey had an absolute day. Chris has him in Dynasty. I know he loves to talk about him, so we'll talk about him a
Yeah.
little bit later. Um, Steelers Ravens again. Lamar Jackson and probably the MVP. Which I don't agree with, but we can talk about that another time. Um, yeah, Ravens dominate. Simple as that. Steelers have a lot of question marks on offense. So, and I took the Ravens as well. Um, Broncos Bills. You know, I saw my guy Bo Nix have an absolute seed, like 50-yard touchdown in the first drive, and I was like, "Oh, we got a game," and nothing else happened after that. And so, yeah, Bills dominated. I took the Bills as well. Um, Chargers and Texans play Texans and Chiefs play. Regardless, similar to Chris, I had the Chiefs winning regardless of who they played. And then this is the big game, Bills Ravens. This is where Chris and I split. I take Bills. I love Josh Allen. I love what he's doing. Um, I know we talk about Lamar and Derrick Henry, basically both like two MVP caliber players, and that run game is dangerous. But this is kind of bold of me to say, but James Cook and Josh Allen are doing similar things. I'm not saying they're going to get 250 rushing yards each, but they're probably or combined, but they could easily get 180 rushing yards combined, and James Cook can get some catches out of the backfield. I think he's not as dangerous as Derrick Henry, but he's a dangerous running back that if the Bills use, as well as Ty Johnson, who has had a pretty good season as well. Um, they have a dangerous backfield with Josh Allen, so. Chris, you cut out there. Were you about to say something?
Nope, nope. All you.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I got the Bills winning and moving on to play the Chiefs to a similar AFC Championship rematch we've seen many times already. Like Chris said, they're both underwhelming teams, but I will say this: whoever wins that game wins the Super Bowl to me. Bills, Ravens are the two teams that will win this. One of them will win the Super Bowl. So I have the Bills playing the Chiefs, and then I have the Bills miraculously, somehow, going into Kansas City and beating them. Probably a similar score to what has been many times before, 34-31, and going and against the Lions. It's going to be an absolute movie of a Super Bowl to me. Bills, Lions, two teams that have never won a Super Bowl. So you have the country split. That's what I would see. Um, if it was, in my opinion, if it was Lions Chiefs, everybody's rooting for the Lions just because they want to see that first Super Bowl. Or actually, I don't know. Maybe people want to see the three-peat. But I have the Bills beating the Lions too. I got Josh Allen being Superman right here, um, doing everything he possibly can to get the Bills there. I think he had a phenomenal game against a tough Denver defense. He could do it against Baltimore. He could do it against Kansas City. Um, yeah. So I have the Bills winning the entire thing, and I think that's pretty bold considering how the Bills defense has played, but they had a great game against Bo Nix and a great Sean Payton offense. I think if they keep it up, the Bills can go pretty far.
Yeah, it's interesting because if we do see a Super Bowl matchup of, like Bills Lions, I think I would be picking the NFC team.
Mm,
If it's the Lions or if it's the Eagles, I don't know. I don't think the Bills. I know the Bills went into Detroit and they did beat them pretty easily, but
yeah.
there's just something about like maybe it's because I'm root for the Jets in the same division. Like I've just seen Josh Allen so many times, and they haven't been a team since under the McDermott era that's been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. And I know that's obviously very
Mm,
difficult with Kansas City there, but the Bengals did it, right? The Bengals
right.
are the only team to have done that. So I don't know. It's just like it kind of feels like
It's a
obviously
tough
we
one.
weren't around, but like back in the Eastern Conference in like the 90s when there were some
Yeah.
really good teams, like the Knicks had really good teams, but they just couldn't beat Michael Jordan. It kind of feels like the
No,
same thing,
it's a good
like
point.
Patrick Mahomes. Like even when Tom Brady was playing in their prime, like the Patriots had gone like a good 10 years without being in the Super Bowl. Like they lost to the Giants
Yep.
in 2011, and then it took them a while to get back. Like they lost to the Ravens, they lost to the Broncos.
Yeah.
Um there was just some times in there where they weren't able to get off the hump, but it doesn't feel like anyone's been able to. Well, because they really haven't. They haven't been able to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, other than Tom Brady
Yeah.
himself and then Joe Burrow. But I think now we should just kind of go into the games and break them down one by one, talk
Yeah.
about them, and then
Well,
I think
Chris, let me ask
next
you this real
week.
quick. Let me ask you this real quick about the point you just made. Didn't people say that at first when Tom Brady won his first couple?
Say what?
You say that nobody could beat him.
I mean, I'm sure,
Just
but you know,
you know,
that's
people
just
do have a
like
different feeling about
this.
this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point because they did they three-peat? I don't remember. I
No,
know they
I don't think the
won.
Pats ever. I don't think the Pats ever three-peated.
Let me
I
check.
can't recall that. I don't think so. But my point in
They
saying
won
that
three
is
Super Bowls in 4 seasons. Okay,
4 seasons.
so
Yeah, so there's a break in the middle.
yeah, no
Um,
team has ever three-peated. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
I
mean,
I
look,
don't know, Chris.
it's hard to keep. It's hard to win the Super Bowl one year. It's hard to go back. I mean, three-peat would be an incredible feat in sports, and I definitely think it would solidify them as the best dynasty ever, just because. I don't think we've seen a three-peat in sports since the '90s Yankees when they won
Yeah,
98, 99,
nine
2000.
2000.
So, I don't know,
Yeah,
it'd be interesting. I think next week when we get to the conference championship round, it would be cool to, like, go through the hypothetical matchups and pick who we think would
yeah,
win based off of those matchups. Because I think it would definitely change for me, like, if the Chiefs were out of the picture. If the Chiefs are in, like, I'm gonna pick them no matter what. It's just
yeah. Good point.
and I hate to say it because, like, I don't know how much of an impact it actually has, but, like, they tend to always get a referee advantage just based on some of the calls that they get.
Yeah,
You would
especially
think
when it's
that that would
home.
continue, and, like, the NFL wants them to three-peat, like, it's great
Yeah,
marketing. Taylor Swift's still around, like, Mahomes
guess you cut out there for a second.
getting a phone call, but it's just I think they would like them to three-peat, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I think now let's just go into some of the games.
yeah.
I can take, the first one that we had, which was
Go for it.
um, the Chargers and the Texans. So I think me and you, and feel free to jump in. Me and you both kind of forgot that the Chargers historically don't play well in the playoffs. Like we were kind of blinded
Yeah,
by the turnaround that Harbaugh has had. But when you kind of get into it, I think I read that the Chargers only beat two playoff teams this year, or one playoff team this year, and it was Denver
yeah.
twice. So their body of work wasn't great. Um, I was not high on the Texans at all. Like, they were playing really bad, and I
They
didn't
were
think
not
that they would.
playing good football. Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't think that they would lock in like this. So, I am and the Chargers had their chances, like, they
yeah.
got a field goal on their first possession, and then they got the ball back, and they can only get another 3 points, and it's like, in the playoffs, when you're not capitalizing on turnovers, it's going to come back to bite you. So
Right.
I was surprised at how lopsided it was, but like I said, I think we both forgot that the Chargers historically just don't play well in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm gonna be real with you, Herbert just struggled, man. And I'm not saying that it was all on him. I mean, Will Anderson was terrorizing him for a lot of the game. Just most of that defense was. So he had a lot of pressure on him. Um, 4 picks is 4 picks. Two or three of them were not really on him. There were a lot of bobble passes, so it is
Yeah.
also fair. You could go either way with some of them, but um, I don't know. I think the Chargers had a game plan of running the football heavy, and when they realized early on it couldn't work, they went into panic mode and just said, "Yo, Herbert, you got to throw the ball 30, 40 times." Um, I don't think I think Herbert is capable of that. I think it's just on such short notice in terms of like a panic mode. They were like, "We got to go into a shootout kind of thing." I don't think that's what the Chargers were designed for, or at least this entire season. And the Texans realized that the only way Herbert was able to, make great completions or have wide open passes was play action, which was what they utilized a lot because they would run for like 150 yards a game and have 25 to 30 rushing attempts. But let's point out Ladd McConkey, Chris.
Yeah,
Ladd McConkey had like 100 and what, 98 yards or something like that,
I think
197.
so. Yeah, I
Yeah, he
think
broke the
so.
rookie record, which was literally just broken last year by Puka Nakua. This rookie class of receivers, or just in general of offense, has been phenomenal.
Vlad is, obviously I'm a big fan because I traded up for him in our dynasty draft, which was,
Yeah,
it worked out way better than I expected. I just sorry, I
Chris,
don't know
we lost. No, you're good. You're good. Try again. You're
just
good.
keep thing. I think Lad just runs really crisp routes, and
Yeah,
we've seen slot guys like that with elite route running succeed in the NFL, and he's really fast too. I mean, you saw that 86-yard touchdown on third
yeah,
down. He got it. He kind of circled to the first down marker, and he was gone. Um,
yeah.
I think the Chargers really need to get like a number one wide receiver. Like I know Lad had a really good year, but you need like a solid wide out on the outside because when you're going against a corner like Derek Stingley and
Yeah.
your options outside are Quentin Johnston and like
And
Josh
Joshua
Palmer, like
Palmer.
it's just not gonna cut it. So I
No.
don't know who they're gonna get because this draft isn't great overall, and I don't think they're gonna get T. Higgins. Like, why would he go from just Joe Burrow to Justin Herbert? Like it doesn't make sense. I
Mm,
do think they need another wide out, honestly.
mm. That's a whole other conversation. If you say
Yeah,
that,
it's an
Chris, about
off-season
T. Higgins,
take.
I'm curious. I'm curious what you want to say about that. But Texans, real quick, great defense. CJ Stroud looked crisp, at least good enough to win the game for sure. They're gonna have a lot on their hands with a tough Chiefs defense. But we'll talk about that probably on Friday, maybe just predicting these games, stuff like that. Chris and I made brackets, and although they're wrong, we'll still make game picks probably on Friday, just regarding of we think could win. Um, we did just talk about a lot about our bracket, saying regardless whoever's there, we think these 4 teams can make it or whatever to the championship games, but we never know. Things could change during the week, whatever. Um, but we'll go on to the next one. It was Steelers Ravens. Now, Chris, Lamar Jackson, you and I saw the All Pro voting come out, and Lamar won All Pro voting, probably the MVP of the league this year. He's had a phenomenal season, and quite frankly, the only reason why the Steelers were in the playoffs was because of their defense. No offense to Russ, but he did struggle a lot this year. George Pickens struggled. Um, that Steelers offense is not good. Mike Tomlin, obviously a great coach, but he has I think this was his sixth straight loss in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been rough.
Baltimore completely lopsided. Yep, Derrick Henry is a threat. Okay, and quite frankly, this is also bold of me to say. I think Derrick's a little scarier than Lamar because you always are so self conscious as a defense if Lamar's going to pull it and take it himself. that, maybe you don't worry about Derrick Henry as much and forget that you're going to need 4 or 5 guys to tackle him every time he has the ball, you know? So I obviously Lamar's dangerous as well, but I'm trying to say is that backfield is so deadly. And the Ravens, I saw that stat when they only ran the ball like what, like 10 times against the Chiefs last year in the playoffs or something like that, or
Yeah,
15
yeah.
or whatever it was. And they cleared that number in like the first half of this game against the Steelers. And that's all they gotta do. Take their time going down the field, let Lamar and Derrick Henry eat on the rushing game, and just get long drives and dominate. That's all they did. And if you do that against Buffalo, they could probably beat Buffalo. If they do that against Kansas City, they could probably beat Kansas City. Keep guys like Mahomes, keep guys like Josh Allen off the field. So go ahead, Chris. What
Actually,
were your takes on this
no,
game?
you just made everything that you said I agree with, but there's one thing you said that I wanted to circle back to, and it was the
Mm,
point about Derrick Henry being a bigger threat than Lamar, and I actually agree with that. Obviously, in terms of the rushing attack, and Kirk Herbstreit pointed out something pretty interesting during the broadcast. I'm not sure if you caught that, but the Ravens were running a lot of RPOs and read options, as they should when you
yeah.
have a dual threat like Lamar and the best running back in the AFC,
Yep.
right? So if you were watching the edge rushers, whether it was TJ
TJ
Watt or
Watt. Yeah.
whoever's on the other side for the Steelers, it's their game plan was to not ignore Lamar, but you can't let King Henry beat you.
Yeah.
So
It was
you
just
can't
focus
stop both
Derrick
of
every
them,
time.
and you have to pick one. So they
Yeah.
picked Henry, and he still had his way with them, and Lamar would take what he can get. I mean, Lamar ran a lot more than I expected. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was just because, they were down Flowers and they knew that they could just kind of impose their will on the Steelers. Like, this felt like a game where the Ravens could have put up 45 points if they wanted, and they only
They
had
want it.
28.
Yeah.
And I say they
Yeah.
only had 28. They had 4 touchdowns. Like, it kind of felt like they were just coasting. Like, it was 21 nothing at one point.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Chris, is it's so dangerous with the two of them. Not to say that, not to discredit Lamar. I'm saying if you don't put, if you don't load the box, these guys, they're just going to change the audible if it was a passing play and run it. That's as simple as that. They have such a simple game plan. And if you do load the box, oh, RPO then, Rashad Bateman on a slant or a little fade, and it's a touchdown. Like you said, Chris, Bateman was a big step up for them. And I know they didn't have Zay Flowers this game, but clearly they didn't need it. Why? Because they have friggin' Derrick Henry running it for 170 yards. So if Buffalo wants to beat them, you're going to need to load up the box and trust your corners to beat all these pass catchers. And there's no other way around it because you need a spy Lamar. You need a minimum of 3 guys tackling Derrick Henry at once, and you need to trust your safeties or defensive backs and corners or whatever the heck you want to call them, and beat these guys 1-on-1. That's the only way you're going to get around the Ravens, and it's a tough task.
Yeah, it's a tough task. I do think that they have, if they want to go with the spy route, like Matt Milano matches up pretty well because he can run sideline
Yeah.
to sideline as fast as any linebacker in the league. Um, that first time that they played a couple years ago in the playoffs, like that was just an ugly performance, and King Henry just completely changes the dynamic of the Ravens offense. And Lamar
Yeah.
threw 40 touchdowns this year. Like Lamar is an elite passer now. So I think it'll be very different this time around. That was a low scoring game, if I remember correctly, and Lamar threw a pick
Yeah.
six to Taron Johnson in the red zone. Like I think we'll see a lot more scoring. But um, just to round out the AFC games, we had kind of the beatdown in Buffalo. It was close for a little bit between Denver and Buffalo. Obviously, Will Lutz missed that field goal at the end of the half that would have made it
Yeah.
10-10, but it just felt like, the Bills dominate time of possession, I feel like, in every game they play. Like, they can
Yeah.
obviously go down there in one play, 60-yard touchdown to, like, Shakir or something, but it's when you watch the Bills, they just do such a good job of staying ahead of the sticks and draining the clock. It's like 7 yards, 6 yards, 5 yards, 4 yards. They rarely have negative plays because they have a really good offensive line and a good game plan. And when they get to like third and medium, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, it's like you can't stop Josh Allen on that quarterback power sweep. Like
Right.
he's just coming downhill. You can't stop him.
Right.
So that game got out of hand quickly when it looked like Denver came out firing. Nice season for Denver. Um, they went from kind of being like at the bottom of the
deadbeat
AFC to
team.
back in the
Yeah,
playoffs. Yeah, like they didn't, and they had all the issues with Russell Wilson, and then no one really thought Bo Nix was going to be this good.
yeah.
So they should have a bright future and keep building around Nix, and I think they could use another threat on offense. You know, me and you just
Hey
talked
man,
about if they
you
kept
brought it
Jerry.
up. Nah, you brought it
Yeah,
up. Don't say I talked about
yeah,
it. You brought it up. This is a great point, Chris. If
yeah.
they
Like if they
kept a
kept
guy like Jerry
Jerry,
Judy,
how
yeah,
would
go ahead.
that complement Sutton? And then they have Marvin Mims coming into his own a little bit, and Troy
Yeah,
Franklin had a nice touchdown. But yeah, I mean Buffalo, like we said, we just couldn't see them losing in the first round, and so they show why they're a powerhouse in the AFC.
yeah. Which was interesting to me because a lot of people were picking Denver. I was like,
Yeah, I know.
okay.
I didn't understand that.
Well, I'm like, okay. Out of all the games you can have as an upset, I'm like, you're gonna. It's not an awful take because of how well rounded Denver was, which I get. But the if you want to compare both offenses, right? It's Josh freaking Allen. Okay,
Yeah,
it's Josh Allen. Bo Nix, incredible year. I think he was second in terms of all time passing touchdowns in a season by a rookie quarterback, just behind Baker. Um, which is a phenomenal year. Bo Nix protected the ball well this year. Sean Payton, the QB guru, whatever the heck you want to call him. Like you said, Chris, one more weapon and they become a dangerous wild card team, in my opinion. They just need to be able to figure out how to move the ball down better. Maybe even another running back, because I don't know about Javonte Williams. He ever since that ACL injury, he hasn't been the same. Um,
yeah,
but that's for a whole other conversation. Buffalo, I don't know why, but they're similar to the Chiefs. It's like in the playoffs, a little bit different. That something like a spark turns on, especially when they're playing in Buffalo. You know, it's just a different atmosphere. That defense becomes a little bit better, which we saw against a pretty good offense against Denver. So, Chris, you and I talked about Buffalo did have a great defense all year round, but then they played Detroit, let up like 40 something points. They played, I believe it was the Rams, let up like 40 points or something like that.
yeah.
So
And
we
they had a
saw
couple bad weeks.
Right. They had a couple bad weeks where we were like, maybe this team is just Josh Allen. But Josh played his game well. James Cook had a phenomenal game, right? You have guys. Josh spread the ball around, which was so important to me, right? It's Kincaid, it's Coleman, it's Shakir. It's not one guy every single time, right? Which is I
Yeah,
can't emphasize it enough. Diggs was such a problem for him. Okay, if all these reports are true of him saying I need targets, I need catches, I need yards, whatever it is, because it's messing with Josh's head. We just saw Josh Allen being elite now. This is why I believe he's MVP, and I understand Lamar will probably win it, but the dude had, let's see, I believe Lamar. This is a quick take because I don't want to take too much time right now, but Lamar had 9 Pro Bowlers on his team. Josh had 0. Okay,
yeah,
and he finished with a better record. That's all I'm going to say. And yes, Lamar had more passing touchdowns than him. I'm looking at total touchdowns; they're very similar. Every stat they had was almost identical. Okay, um, maybe the rushing yards, I think Lamar had more. But yeah, I don't know. Josh just made a great case for MVP this year. I think I thought he should have won it. Chris and I already saying it like it's already announced, but I think Lamar won it for sure based off of the AP voting. We'll move on to the. Oh, Chris, you got anything else to add before we move on to NFC?
no, no, all good.
Okay. All right. Next, first game of the NFC. Um, why am I blanking on this? Was it Packers Eagles? No,
Yeah, it
it
was the
was.
Packers game. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
the
it was
Packers
Pack.
game.
Yeah. No, what was the 1 o'clock game?
The Bills played at 1, and then the Packers
Oh,
played at
right,
four
right, right,
thirty.
right, right. Yeah, my bad, my bad. Yeah. So Packers Eagles. Listen, Jordan Love looked great during the season, at least. Hurts coming off an injury. This was a tough game to pick. Um, I picked the Philly purely for the fact of Barkley and that defense. I think regardless of who the quarterback was, this is kind of bold of me to say, but they could have went in with Taylor McGee, and I quite frankly would have still picked the Eagles. As bold as that is, I think Barkley killed the Packers earlier in the season. He's just too much. He's too dominant. He's just too dominant. It's similar to what we talked about with Derrick Henry. Um, like no disrespect to guys like Hurts or Brown or Smith, but Barkley is the threat on offense there. If you don't load up the box for him. Then they'll just switch it to a passing play. It's simple football basically. But Barkley is he's such a threat, dude. He's such a threat. Power. He's everything you want in a running back. The Packers got banged up early, like I mentioned before. So I think the way the Eagles defense played was beautiful. And I hate saying that as a Giants fan, but it was some great defense. I think that probably in my opinion the best defense in the playoffs right now, which could help them significantly down the road. But Chris, go ahead because I don't really have much to say about this game.
Yeah, it was kind of lackluster from the quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts was off. Obviously,
Yeah,
Jordan Love hasn't had like a great season. Hopefully, for him, he just can continue to develop and stay healthy next year so that the Packers can kind of take that leap in the NFC. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's Saquon and it's the defense, and that's not a bad formula to try to ride it all the way to the Super Bowl, especially with how
yeah,
good their offensive line is. Like Jalen Hurts stands back there. The first touchdown to Jahan Dotson, I think he had, almost 7 seconds to throw. Like that's an eternity in the NFL.
yeah.
And I know that, for a team as good as the Eagles are, they don't have any shortage of headlines. It's like AJ Brown reading a book. Like I know he said it wasn't a headline, but like and Jalen Hurts was like kind of making fun of him for it. So they just have a lot of noise, but it's a very good football team. Packers were
Well,
just kind
hold on.
of dropping like
Yeah,
flies. Like
yeah.
I don't have that much to say about this game either. I think
Well,
it
I will. I
kind of was what we
will.
expected.
I will point out, right? Yes, I agree with that, Chris. I will point out though, what was interesting though is I kind of forgot about this. Was the first play of the game because you reminded me of the Jahan Dotson, right? The first play of the game is a fumble on the kickoff return for Packers, and the Eagles are set up in red zone immediately, and it's literally like what was it? The first play they scored or something like that, like or second play they scored to Dotson.
Yeah, it was
Um,
something like that.
yeah, yeah. If you took that score away, let's say like the Packers were fine, the entire game it's a one score game. Like if the Packers kept that ball and didn't
Yeah,
do anything,
the
had
Packers
no
also
lead.
missed a chip shot field
This
goal
is
too. So
also true. Also true. So this game could have hypothetically been a lot closer than we thought, regardless of the Packers' injuries. This is what I wanted to say. But um the Packers kind of just I mean, fair enough, but they kind of gave up. You have you have to like two or three new offensive linemen come in that game from injuries that happened that half. That's brutal. That's a huge loss. Jordan Love, no time, right? But like you said on the other side, it's not like Hurts was a threat. Quarterback was imposing on the other team at all. This was a more Josh Jacobs versus Barkley and heavy defense game, which is fair. I mean, you got to see some of that sometimes. If you want to call it boring, whatever. I kind of like watching defenses dominate sometimes. Um, but yeah, like you said, Chris, I just a Barkley defense combination is not a bad formula to run in the playoffs, especially when your quarterback's coming off of a concussion. Um, you could definitely, as if I'm Jalen Hurts, I definitely rely on short routes to Brown and Smith. Just put it in their hands, dude. Because if you want to get the passing game going, that's all you got to do. So they're not gonna have a bad. I think they could beat the Rams. I think they
I think
can,
so
but I wouldn't be
too.
surprised if the Rams. I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams won. But that's another conversation. Go ahead, Chris. You
Yeah,
want to
I
move on to
think.
the next game?
Uh,
Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Go
for
ahead.
sure. I think no, I just think Philly will wake up a little bit. I think Jalen Hurts being out was for the last couple weeks was definitely a factor into why this offense is a little slow. I think with another week of full practice and some game reps, it'll get a little bit better for them. But yeah, this is probably
Yeah,
the game of the week, Sunday night football between the Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of back and
yeah.
forth, a lot of going forward on fourth down. Some questionable clock management from Tampa Bay. It's always been a struggle for Todd Bowles, even going back to his Jets days. Um, we both picked Tampa, but I don't think either of us would have been surprised if the Commanders won. I just think that
No, I think we talked about that a little bit.
if we talked about how Tampa last year picked up a win over Philly and then they had Detroit on the ropes, so
Yeah,
we kind of thought that that experience would carry over to this year, and they have a better rushing attack with Irving. Their defense is quietly very good this year. They don't have like a lot of household names, but it's a very solid defense. And then you just have Jaden Daniels, who seems to get better as the game goes on. Like when they're in the most chaotic situation in the fourth quarter, it just seems like Jaden Daniels plays his best football, and that's a great quality to have, especially as a rookie, but for any quarterback, right? Like think of some of their wins this year. They had that game against the Falcons that went in overtime. They
Yeah, it
had
was
the
huge.
crazy Hail Mary against the Bears. I know that wasn't really anything
Yeah.
that Daniels did special, but even that game against the Cowboys, I know they ended up losing, but, like, he leads that drive and it goes I think it went into overtime, and then he had the game-winning drive against the Eagles with very little time left, so he's just played some exceptional football in
Yeah,
crunch time. Um, they have a lot of veteran experience that I think is helping them. You know, you have Wagner on defense, and you have guys like Austin Eckler on offense, and obviously
yeah,
Terry McLaurin. You know, he hasn't had much success, but like you've had guys that have been in the league for a very good amount of time, to where the
right.
whole team itself isn't young. And I think Daniel's getting. I think he had like 40 starts in college or something, going back to his
Yeah,
Arizona State days into
experience.
LSU like that. That really helps. Like obviously
Yeah,
college games aren't the same magnitude, but just being in game situations, like that's stuff you can't practice.
yeah.
And then how fitting for that game to end on a doink
Oh, of
into the
course,
uprights. So it was just
of
like
course.
we thought it was hooking and it was going to overtime and it doinks right in. So
I was
it's
shocked to
unfortunate
see that.
for Tampa to go out like that. Baker Mayfield had a great year and they might lose their offensive coordinator. I know some teams want to interview Liam Cohen as their head
Yeah,
coach, but I don't know. The Commanders just seem to be just getting started. They're looking like they could be a threat in the NFC for years to come.
yeah. Um, you know what was sad about Baker was when they had Chris Godwin, Baker was probably up there for MVP. Godwin was that safety valve for him, and when he lost, and that was huge. And they overcame a lot, right, without Godwin. Um, what's devastating is seeing a guy like Mike Evans. And obviously, Mike Evans. Luckily, he has a ring, which is great. I think Mike Evans is probably a Hall of Famer. Um, a guy like Evans putting up crazy numbers for over a decade now, um, and just consistently doing it. I love watching Mike Evans play. Um, so yeah, the Buccaneers are such a fun team to watch. I know my brother hates when I pick him because he's a Falcons fan. He hates Baker. I love Baker Mayfield. I think he got done dirty when he first got in the league. Um, I as bold as it was to take him first overall in the draft, I thought it was a great pick by the Browns. They just being the Cleveland Browns, they managed that horribly, screwing him over every single year. Um, Baker learned a lot from a guy like Sean McVay from the Rams for a short time, got a big contract, and got a chance to replace Tom Brady. And, he obviously Baker's not Tom Brady, but Baker's Baker Mayfield, and he's doing what he possibly can to make the Buccaneers a dynasty. And, Baker's, in my opinion, got it unlocked for the rest of his career if the Buccaneers are interested in him. I mean, they should be. He's keeping them, competitive every single year now. Hopefully, Mike Evans doesn't die off soon enough or something like that. Hopefully, they can find a replacement or something, maybe. I have another hot take for that in the offseason we could talk about for sure because I love Baker Mayfield. But like you said, Chris, Jaden Daniels has been phenomenal, and with they guys like him and Lamar always talk about like, oh, they want to be known as passers, right? And, because we're in this rushing league. Jaden has been throwing the ball beautifully this entire year, not just let alone that game. Like he doesn't turn the ball over much. His passer rating's always great. His legs are last resort, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous for a guy like him or Lamar. Um, just be like, okay, I've got absolutely nothing open. I'm gonna just take 5 yards here on this run and be done, right? So yeah, do I think they beat the Lions? No. I think they compete. Yes, it's a bold take, but I do think Commanders and Jaden Daniels stay close with them, just for the fact that Jaden's been balling out. You see the clip of him, Chris, at the end when the field goal went in. He's just not even celebrating. Like he looked like Kobe Bryant or something like that when the game finished. It was like job's
Yeah,
not
and
finished
it's
kind of vibe. It was crazy.
a good mentality to have, especially for an underdog going on the road to
Yeah,
play the number one
yeah,
seed. Like, not many people think they can do it, but all that matters for them is that they think that they can do it and kind of believe that
yeah.
they're the better team that game. So I'll
Amen.
be excited. And obviously, you're a Giants fan, so you're probably not too thrilled, but I do think that they're going to be at the top of the NFC for the foreseeable future, NFC East
You
at
know,
least.
what's weird is I don't like Washington, but I hate Dallas and Philly more, so I don't mind
Yeah.
rooting for them a little
Yeah.
bit. They're like it's hard to root against them, especially when you watch a story like Jaden Daniels. You made a very interesting point though, Chris, about the experience he had in college, right? I mean, he was at what was it, ASU, right? He was at
Yeah, he
ASU,
was at
right?
Arizona
Yeah.
State.
Yeah, and then he transferred to LSU, became Heisman, went into. I mean, obviously they didn't do much damage in the playoffs or anything like that, but it was a playing in a conference like that is much different than ASU, and he came out and he balled. And having a lot of college experience is a massive factor. I think that's something we could talk about in the future for guys like Michael Penix and Bo Nix getting drafted in the first round. They play like what 5-ish years of college football. They just had
Yeah.
that experience in their belt, and they're 25, 26, whatever, getting drafted, and they're like, "Oh, that's so old for an NFL player." But I'm like, quarterbacks can play till they're 40 now. They could if they wanted to. I mean, maybe 38. That's a solid 12, 15 maybe years of football that you're getting out of a first round quarterback. That's a franchise right there, or that's a dynasty. 15 years, at least if he's good. And honestly, I like Penix. I like Bo Nix a lot. I think they're both doing well. And you make a great point for Jaden Daniels as well. He's played a lot of college football, a lot of experience under his belt, and I think that's why he's been so incredible in the NFL. Right, he adjusted from ASU to LSU, right? Because they're two completely different kinds of college football, and he adjusted from LSU to Washington, right? And he's going to go against a Detroit team that's very tough. Will they win? I don't think so, but I think that's more on the defense than Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I think obviously having that experience helps, but taking a look at last night's game, um, you didn't expect you weren't surprised. I was a little surprised by how bad it got
No,
for Sam Darnold and how quickly the magic kinda ran out, but, like, when you look at how the Lions played and how Aaron Glenn schemed that defense, there was
he's a genius.
a lot of press coverage, like, jam the receivers,
Yeah,
bring the corners up. You're not so worried about getting beat over the top because you're confident in your
yeah.
pass rush, and you're just kinda letting the dogs loose on the defensive line, and the Rams followed that formula. They had 8 sacks. I know a lot of that came from
It
Sam
was
Darnold
9
holding the
actually.
ball, like and it was 9, yeah, but everything that we saw from Sam Darnold, like, on a national stage and everyone's, maybe a little surprised, like, that's what I watched for 3 years, like, he
Yeah,
snowballs so quickly when something goes wrong. You're, like, screaming at your TV, get rid of the football," and he's taking another sack just because like,
yeah,
he's like a deer in headlights, he freezes up. I mean, we saw him on that infamous seeing ghosts moment. That was extremely
yeah.
embarrassing for the fan base when he said that for himself. ESPN should not have aired that, but,
Oh yeah,
um you see the happy feet and the pocket presence is not there at all, like, something that makes a guy like Matt Stafford, obviously his arm, but he sticks in the league so long, is because you watch him in the pocket, and it's like when someone's in his lane, he's not, like, running out of the pocket to try to
right.
obviously, Tom
Extend
Brady
the
made a
play.
living out of this. Step up in the pocket, slide left or right, and, hit the check down if you need, and that's why Tom
Yeah,
Brady was able to play for 20 years and, for the most part, avoid serious injury because he was able to navigate the pocket better than anyone we've ever seen, and I
yeah,
think Stafford does a great job of that as well. We saw it last night a couple of times where the pass rusher was getting home, and he just step up and find Kyron or find the tight end or
yep,
Puka. So, yeah, the Rams are definitely getting hot at the right time. They have one of the best coaches left in the playoffs, so I definitely think that's an
yeah,
advantage from a schematic standpoint. Like, I would give them the advantage in the coaching department over the Eagles for sure. Um, I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if it's a close game between those 2.
yeah,
Now the Vikings have some questions to answer because it feels like every narrative about Sam Darnold, maybe getting an extension or a franchise tag, like, kinda just went out the window within 2 weeks because of how poorly he played in the 2 biggest games of the season.
yeah. So I'll dive into the game a little bit. That's probably a conversation for the off season. I have a lot to talk about for that. I said last week, Darnold, I didn't expect him. I picked the Vikings to win against the Lions, right? When they played him in week 18. But then I saw how he played. I said, he is cracking under pressure. And once I saw that, I didn't think he's going to change. And I said that when I made this pick, I picked the Rams against the Vikings. Vikings have an incredible defense, incredible. Brian Flores has done an amazing job, right? But what did the Rams do? They just replicated exactly what the Lions did. I said if Sam Darnold struggles half as much as he did against the Detroit, they're going to have no shot in this game. Okay, and quite frankly, had no shot. Doesn't matter. Um, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. You could have Chris Carter, Randy Moss on that team with Sam Darnold, and they would have not done anything as well. I think the way that the Rams play defense, Jared Verse is an absolute dog. I love him as well. The Rams dominated and found the formula. Darnold did not know how to adjust. And quite frankly, Matt Stafford, veteran leadership, bro. Him and Cooper Cup, they've been there before. They know what they're doing. I like Puka. Puka's a dog as well. I wouldn't, again, like Chris said, I wouldn't be surprised if they could edge out the Eagles barely, but it'll be a very close game. I think being in Philly is a tough one. They got to go across country. I love LA's story with the wildfires and all that stuff. Um, they're fighting for their state right now, and it's a great story to have. I don't know. I love what the Rams did against the Vikings. I hate what Sam Darnold's become because I thought he could have fully turned it around and had that kind of Baker Mayfield story. And he did for most of the year. But the difference between Darnold and Baker is the clutch gene, right? I mean, you've seen Baker in these close games before. He's able to finish it out. Obviously not this year. I would blame a little bit more on their defense compared to Baker himself. But um, Darnold just cracked under pressure and he didn't know how to adjust to a very pressure heavy defense with like you said, like press on the receivers. What I'm kind of shocked about too, Chris, is Jefferson and Addison were kind of locked up. They were kind of locked up in this game, and I'm not saying that there was a way to adjust around that, but Darnold did take 9 sacks. People are trying to say it's not on Darnold, but like you said, Chris, he's holding on to the ball too long, right? I mean, that is, I say 75% of those sacks he took were on him. And although there is pressure, like you said, Chris, stepping up in the pocket and just dumping it off or throwing it away is something that Stafford and a guy like Tom Brady have been able to do their entire career, and they learned so quickly that that's what made their career last so long. So, in terms of Darnold getting a new contract with Minnesota, no. In terms of Darnold getting a free agent contract, yes, I believe he goes to another team and gets a shot at QB1 for sure. Possibly the Giants, maybe, possibly, maybe the Jets. I don't know, Chris. I don't know how you feel about that. We could talk about that in the future for sure. But I believe it's JJ McCarthy time in Minnesota.
Yeah, it probably is, and I don't know. It just seems like if someone gives Sam Darnold a crazy contract, like that's just a bad contract waiting to
Yeah,
happen because you
I
saw what it
agree.
took for him to be so successful. Where like Kevin O'Connell was so good at maximizing his physical attributes, like his strong arm and his, he's decently athletic for
He
a
is.
non-mobile quarterback, but it's really hard to mask the mental whatever he lacks in mental
Yeah,
capability as a quarterback
and football
without an
IQ
elite
as
coach
well.
like, yeah, like Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah,
So, if he goes to a team, like let's say he goes to the Giants, like he's not going to put up
he's gonna
36
struggle.
touchdowns again.
No, he
Like that's
won't.
not going to
No, he won't.
happen. So
I know.
his best shot would be in Minnesota, but I agree that it's probably JJ McCarthy time.
Yeah. Um, we got a little bit of some coaching news. We could talk about that for a little bit. The first one I want to point out, Chris, is Vrabel just
Yep.
got with the Patriots,
Yeah.
and they let go of Mayo, who was also a former player. They bring in a new former player for the Pats. I think he won 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots. He was a player, or no, maybe 2, whatever it was. But he's a former player. He played in, I believe, the Tom era for a little bit, um, and the Belichick era. I think Vrabel is a great match for the Patriots as much as other teams wanted him to be their head coach. I think Vrabel fits well with the Patriot, like the quote unquote Belichick Patriot way.
Yeah, I mean, once they fired Gerard Mayo, it was extremely obvious that that's where Mike Vrabel was gonna go, right? Like,
Mm,
I know the Jets had interviewed him, and I told you that was my top candidate, but obviously, as soon as
yeah.
I got that, I was like, "Okay, he's going to the Patriots." He's a very good coach. I think you know, he raises the floor of what that Patriots team can be fundamentally and physically.
Yeah.
Don't know that that's the right guy to maximize Drake May's potential,
Yeah. Good point.
like you
Good
wanna
point.
like you wanna pair because realistically, like they're probably gonna bring in Josh McDaniels as offensive coordinator, and like that worked for the Patriots, but like really only worked with Tom Brady. Like, is it going to work with Drake May? Part of the reason that
Mm.
Jaden Daniels is so successful is because Dan Quinn brought in Cliff Kingsbury, who's
Cliff
always been
Kingsbury.
extremely successful with quarterbacks. We
Yeah.
saw Ben Johnson, took that interview with the Patriots, and he probably wanted that job because of Drake May.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I'm not sold that Ben Johnson is going to be like the next Sean McVay because I don't know. It just
Good
seems
point.
like
Here's I'll
he's just
say
kind
this
of
about
rubbed me
Ben
the wrong
Johnson.
way with how he's
Yeah.
handled his opportunity because like he doesn't want he wants like all this control, but he's never been a coach before, and like no one even knew who the guy was until Dan Campbell
I'll
hired
be
him as
honest with
offensive
you. I'll be
coordinator.
honest with you. All right. There's two things he become. One, like you just said, his peak is Sean McVay kind of offensive minded coach. His bottom is Matt Nagy. That's what he reminds me of, bro.
Yeah.
The offensive coordinator from the Chiefs turned to the Bears, right? It's like, oh man, he's the offensive coordinator of the Super Bowl winners and Mahomes, and he's gonna be great for us, right? And Ben Johnson's kind of similar story, right? A dominant Lions offense, which is great, but you bring up all these like red flags for him, Chris, of he wants to get full control, but I'm like, he's never been a head coach before. I'm like, that's not what you want at all, in my opinion, out of a head coach. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we're wrong or whatever when we say that. But I think when you're a guy like Ben Johnson and you're going to get all these head coaching jobs or offers, you should surround yourself with people with a lot of experience, right? And to help you, okay? Because you can't just say, I'm going to take it on by myself, because that's the stupidest thing you could do as a head coach, in my opinion, at least, especially when you're brand new. Um, Now, in terms of Vrabel, he's got a young Drake May to develop. He's got 136 mil in cap space, and he's got no, what pick is it? The fourth pick in the draft. So he's got a lot to work with. All right, and in my opinion, there's no excuses for Vrabel. He's got everything to set up this dynasty, this franchise for the next maybe 3 to 5 years. In terms of drafting the right young guys. So if he does it right, then yeah, fair play. But this is going to be hard to screw up, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of resources, ton of money. Um, but yeah, I mean there's not too much talent on that team right now other than Drake May, right? Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah,
They're pretty
no, I
weak
agree.
on both trenches. Their offensive line has been a mess for a while. Gonzalez is a really good player on defense. They have some decent players on defense, but they have like zero NFL talent at skill positions, right?
Yeah,
Like you can't seriously run out there with Jalen Polk and Kayshon Boutte and Stevenson's
yeah,
all right, but it's just they're gonna have to overpay for someone or spend premium assets on, a Teteroa McMillan maybe, or
yeah. I
maybe
was
an
gonna say
Abdul
they're gonna take
Carter or something.
McMillan. Yeah,
But they should probably shore up that offensive line first things first.
yeah. I don't think there's any other coaching news right now, right, Chris?
No, I mean, there's nothing. There's just we're doing a lot of interviews. I mean, the Jets have requested 17 candidates, which feels excessive.
That's wild.
I'm hoping they hire a GM by the end of this week, and then we have a clearer picture on who the
Yeah,
head coach is going to be. Yeah, there's a lot going on. It's a slow process, but it's an important one. So I'm not mad that they're taking their time with it.
yeah. We're gonna be running out of time in a little bit, but what we'll talk about on Friday, hopefully, is we'll make our game picks for the playoffs. I mean, obviously, we just talked about our brackets. So, like I said before, we'll still pick the games like we do every week, regardless of our brackets, right or wrong. But we'll also talk about. I want to talk about those 17 candidates for you, Chris. Not all of them. I mean, just in general, what you think of that. I also want to talk about for the
Yeah.
Giants. Like Chris talked about with me, the Giants. What my thoughts are on keeping Dable and Shane. I'll get into a little bit. I think it'll be interesting to talk about. That'll be for another podcast. Hopefully, more stuff happens this week, um, in terms of coaching stuff or GM stuff around the league, not just with the Jets and Giants. But yeah, we're gonna have a lot of fun off-season talk because there's a lot of pretty valuable free agents out there, as well as draft positions that are not quarterbacks, which I will find interesting to talk about because it's like every year it's always talking about the draft and like, oh, who's the quarterback taken? But I want to look into a little bit, that like pick 3 to 10 area of the draft and see, who's really valuable to some of these teams and who could be taken. So, Chris, you got any final thoughts before we end it here?
No. definitely would like to have some news regarding the Jets coaching search and head general manager search by the end of this week. I don't know if that's going to happen, but hopefully would like to see a little more clarity, maybe some candidates at least ruled out. And yeah, we'll see. We got another, some people call it the best weekend of the NFL season, the divisional round. So it should be
Mm,
exciting with all these matchups. And then obviously we got the national championship coming up next Monday. So a lot of good stuff
yeah.
going on.
Yeah, got a lot of great football going on. Yeah, we'll also get baseball coming in a couple months, maybe too. So can't wait to talk more sports with you, Chris. Another episode in the books. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Appreciate you all, and have a good week.